I think it's obvious where we want to start this week, though, and that is with the Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X confirmed announcements, price points, release dates. So if you guys haven't been paying attention, 2 days ago, there was an Xbox Series S leak that had a bunch of details about the Xbox Series S. And rather than let the rumors linger, Xbox just went ahead and said, hey, we'll push out a tweet at around 3:30 a.m. Eastern time confirming all of those rumors. So I think I've got the tweet pulled up here. Let's see if
it's the only time I've ever actually witnessed breaking news, because those are my hours.
they launched this. So look, we're talking about spooky season here. Is it an omen that they announced this at the witching hour of 3 a.m. Eastern time?
I think it's more a sign that we're in quarantine and time doesn't mean anything anymore.
Well, I think if there's any omen, it's this reply from Donger Daddy.
We are going to talk about this.
If you're not watching the video and you're listening on podcast services, go just look up Donger Daddy's reply. He's got some creepy imagery and text in another language that is basically a curse onto Xbox's head. So,
and I've got a lot of questions about it, because if you go look at the dude's profile, otherwise it's pretty normal. But on this day, he decided to curse Xbox.
Who knows? Who knows? We shouldn't waste too much time at the top talking about that, though, because there is actual news here. The tweet reads, let's make it official. Xbox Series S next-gen performance in the smallest Xbox ever. $299 ERP. Looking forward to sharing more soon. Promise. Guys, this whole next-gen announcement stuff has been insanely weird. Due to COVID and just due to this weird, like, staring contest between PlayStation and Xbox with the announcement of the price, like who's gonna blink first. Did you think it was gonna be like this?
No.
I know Microsoft didn't.
No, they didn't. In fact, Phil Spencer tweeted today, friend of the show, tweeted today that they were actually planning on revealing this stuff next week, and because all the leaks, they just decided to go ahead and get out in front of it. But it's still weird that they didn't just like wait till the next morning to do it.
Yeah, that is odd. It's not like those few hours would have made a difference at that point, because it's already out there and people aren't really going to see it at 3:13. It's going to get a bump in the morning, obviously, come Eastern time. But this whole thing has been so bizarre, as you said. Like, especially like I think before we kind of took a hiatus, we were talking about PlayStation's approach to, or Sony's approach to releasing information through weird technical articles and Wired, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And now we know what both of them look like, but neither of those announcements has felt like, and perhaps this is because there was a lack of like a central like event, kind of like E3, in-person event like E3 to kind of house it. But each of those announcements kind of felt like it just kind of plopped on the internet. People joked about what the console looked like and then it passed on. It's just like the rollout of this information in a piecemeal fashion just seems so kind of antithetical to the hype of building up these next gen launch.
I'm gonna be honest,
consoles.
I had to just think kind of hard about what the PlayStation looks like after you said that. I know we talked about it last week, but like, I'm saying that just to say like that's how little impact it's really had on like my excitement level over these consoles, because I could have drawn you a picture of the PlayStation 4 when it got announced. You know, I was that excited about it. But
it had some actual shapes in it, so it was easier. But
well, the PlayStation 5 has a lot of shapes to it. These Xboxes, we can talk about the design here in just a minute, but I want to color a little bit of just how strange this announcement is. So, I work in the communication department of a video game publisher. We put out a lot of press releases, and timing of those press releases is like a big conversation that we have a lot. You know, like especially when it comes to like events like Gamescom and stuff, we're having to figure out like, okay, when do we want to put out press releases so that they can get the best pickup? Well, kind of what's standard for us if we're going to release a press release on our news is for news of ours, we're going to send that out at 6 a.m. Pacific time. And the reason for that is 6 a.m. is early enough that it's still probably going to be near the top of the inboxes of media people who are on the West Coast. It's 9 a.m. on of the West Coast. It's 9 a.m. on the East Coast. So, it's going to be at the top of their inboxes as they're logging on to work as well. And then people in Europe are still working as well. It's 1 p.m., 2 p.m. They're coming back from lunch and they're going to see our press release at the top of their inbox. So, there's like a coordinated strategy for when we're going to release these things, and it's planned far in advance. And so I'm wondering like what the strategy was for Xbox's social. Like, this wasn't just their one social media guy like deciding to fire this tweet off at 12:13 Pacific time, 3:13 Eastern time. I'm just curious what that conversation is like. Like, hey, these leaks, they're big, they're picking up traction. People are already talking about it. Do you think we should just put something out now? Like, why do you think that they didn't just say, let's just wait till the morning?
I don't have an answer for that beyond maybe they're just they're like, yeah, we're big enough, we can do whatever we want, and we'll still be like, it doesn't matter if Xbox news is at the top of the inbox or not. It's still getting read, But but I think you're right. There probably was a strategy, but I can't begin to fathom what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like this is Microsoft scrambling. I think we've seen especially over the past few years, that Microsoft doesn't scramble very often in general. They have a vision of what they want, and they're executing. And I think, other than like obviously leaks like this, they are still executing on what that vision is in the way that they want to execute it, barring COVID related kind of catastrophes. I just don't know what difference for them those few hours make. Especially on especially on social media where things get buried so easily, and conversations shift so quickly, and the discourse just kind of eats itself. It's like an Ouroboros. I don't know what difference those few hours make for them.
Yeah. Well, and Larry, you make a good point. Like, the reason we do that coordinated 6 a.m. thing is because we're a smaller publisher and we're trying to get as much impact as possible from it. Like, Xbox doesn't have to worry about that. Every single gaming website is talking about this. Every single podcast is going to talk about this. Like, tons of YouTube videos being made about it. But I think it's more important that you're like, okay, at least have a little bit of like normal hours where we get to kind of control that narrative, rather than people waking up to the conversation after it's evolved for 6 hours, and it did, right? Like the Xbox One S memes was like the big thing that was coming out of the announcement because of the design of it. Everybody said it looked like a drive-through speaker, and that kind of ran away. But like, people on the East Coast that are waking up to this, their first encounter with the Xbox Series S was probably not. And I'm sorry if I've called it the Xbox One S. These naming conventions are like, mixing me up. But people on the East Coast are probably waking up and they're not seeing this tweet as their first glimpse of that news. They're seeing memes and having to ask like, oh shit, what did I miss? And that's just like a weird place to be, I think, from a communication standpoint. So like, I don't know, if I was working at Xbox, I would have been like, well, let's hold the tweet. The leaks are out there. The leaks are doing what they're going to do. Like, what difference does it make if we just wait till 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock the next morning and put it out then instead?
Yeah. It looks like a drive-through speaker because it's the special edition for the new Overcooked game. But besides that,
I hated everything about that joke.
I know. You're welcome. Yeah, it was odd, and I don't know why they didn't wait, but I went from not interested at all in another Xbox to maybe kind of interested, to be honest with you.
Like in this specific model?
Yeah, if I have an Xbox this generation, it's going to be the Series S.
Interesting.
I don't know if it's too early to get into that.
I do want to get to that, but let's start with let's start with all the rest of the revealed details here. Now we're not tech guys, so we're not gonna like get into the nitty gritty of all the tech specs that they released because they're just over my head, and I don't think either of you guys have much to say about the specific tech specs either. Correct?
I like the word teraflop.
Yeah, and it's a good word. Good word.
Series X is pretty powerful. So
let's talk about some things that we do know and understand. So the Xbox Series S is going to launch at $299 later this. I think today, right? They confirmed the Series X is going to be $499. Yep. And that both of the consoles are going to launch on November 10th of this year. So that's 2 months from tomorrow, right?
Pre-orders start on the 22nd of September.
Yes. So pretty much all of the lingering questions that we had about these next gen consoles have been answered. So we know a lot about the Xbox Series X. So some details about the Series S. It's discless. It's incredibly small. I don't know if you guys have seen the comparison shots between the S and the X, but when they say it's their smallest console ever, it seems really tiny. So that's cool. It does. I'll pull this picture up again. It does look like a drive-through speaker. It's fair. It's a fair judgment of it. It's a very odd-looking design, in my opinion. You guys saw the leaked images of like the cube version of the Series S before it?
No, I haven't seen that.
So like, I don't know if it was just somebody like mocking it up, or if there was like early prototypes that were shaped like just a cube. I was like, I'm kind of more into that than I am this design. But in all honesty, to me, it just looks like the Xbox One S all digital edition with just a weirdly placed black circle on it.
Yeah, I gotta say, a carryover from our discussion last week about the look of the PlayStation 5. I was thinking about it more and more, and I guess I always found like the first time any console for me was revealed, I found it odd to look at, just because it's such a new, it's so new and fresh in my mind, and also I just haven't been able to like hold it physically and kind of look at it in my entertainment center. So we talked about this briefly last week, but all this stuff is going to fade for me because I'm just going to become a regular part of my household, and I'll forget about how it looks after a few weeks.
Yeah.
It does look like, I saw a lot of people like the memes coming from this were real quality though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just the internet's meme game in general has just been incredible.
A lot of people have a lot of time on their hands right now.
That's true. I don't really know how I want to structure this conversation, so I really just kind of want to open it up to you guys with your thoughts. Now we kind of have a full picture of Xbox's release strategy for these consoles. We now understand what the Xbox Series S and the Xbox Series X are. The Series S is significantly less powerful than the Xbox Series X, which is to be assumed it's $200 cheaper than the system. But you know, now that we kind of see the picture in full, what are your thoughts on Xbox as its own brand? Like, let's not talk about it in the greater context yet. Let's keep it just to Xbox's strategy.
I think this is a little disconnected, but I think it's connected enough that it's worth mentioning that both of these consoles can be obtained through a payment plan that includes Game Pass. Yes, that's the right word, I think. Sorry.
Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So it's got like live and all that in it too.
And the payment plan is Xbox All Access.
Yes.
Which they're actually expanding to 12 new countries with this, which is pretty cool.
And that Game Pass includes EA access to the EA program as well. Mm-hmm. It's just looking at Xbox alone, it's a pretty incredible value. Yeah. It's probably going to be the most accessible that a gaming console has been at launch for the average person in a really long time. And so I just from Xbox's strategy, I think that we're looking at a really successful launch. If you want top tier, top performance, you've got that, and you've got a monthly plan with all the bells and whistles if you have to go that route. If you're okay with sacrificing the top tier quality, you just want the gameplay, then you've got this much more affordable version. I think just as a whole, it's a great strategy for a console release.
Yeah, that's go ahead, Cody.
The all access thing is something I really wanted to hit on, because that, with this announcement, that is the thing that I zeroed in on as kind of unlocking in my mind what Xbox is going for this generation. And we had talked about, before kind of a lot of this information had come out about Microsoft's vision for what the next Xbox was looking like. We were talking a lot about the concept of modular consoles. And that has sort of gone by the wayside, but I have an inkling that what Microsoft is going for more here, and the naming convention kind of tips you off to it, is I think they're viewing this more in line with how phones are handled by people. And it's not, I mean, that's not like a mind-blowing idea. Like, I think Phil Spencer literally said they view their competition as like Google, Amazon, Apple, not so much Sony. And the more I look at the information they released, the more that sort of makes sense to me. The naming convention might seem confusing at first, until you consider that parents already understand the concept of iPhone S and iPhone X. Like, they know what that demarcation is, and that's in like the consciousness of a lot of parents, especially with the S. That's important, because that's a deal that a lot of parents will be snapping up. And so the especially with the financing option, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of your financing plan, they offer to kind of upgrade you from an S to an X. That wouldn't surprise me at all. It just, like, a lot of this information unlocks a lot for me how Microsoft is thinking about this initial launch as kind of a platform from which to launch kind of more regular hardware releases, which they've already been doing with what we saw with the Xbox One X, and something that Nintendo has been doing forever. But I think that's kind of what they're aiming for. They're aiming for kind of this box, and we talked about this box is kind of unlocking this whole array of this whole platform, this whole service, and Game Pass is the center of that. So I don't think we'll probably talk about Sony, but they're just operating on two completely different levels here. Their goals are completely different. I have a feeling Sony will probably measure the success of this console in terms of units sold. Microsoft, I don't think will. But that all access thing is super interesting to me, and I think it gave me a lot more insight into what they're aiming for here.
Yeah, so the all access program is not a new thing.
No.
And in fact, it was, I think it's been in existence almost for the entirety of this generation as well. And they have done those upgrade programs. And I think it's, I don't know what the naming convention is going to be, but in 3 years, 2-3 years, we're going to get another console that's more powerful than the Series X, right?
Yep.
And so I totally see what you're saying, Cody, of like, they're going to say, hey, if you've got this paid off 75%, then you can go ahead and trade it in and, start a payment plan for the next one. And, you get so much money off of it and all this. So
the way they're putting it front and center here, I mean, I know it's been around for a while, but the way they're like highlighting it here is an indication of that for sure. Yeah.
The one thing that I guess, like, this is going to make me sound elitist, I think. But I don't mean it that way. I mean it as like a legitimate question of availability of these things at launch. Like, part of the reason that they're able to control and like keep these things in stock when they first come out is that there is a high price to enter into the next generation, right? So you got to pay $500-$400 for whatever these next gen consoles are going to be. But then when you scale it back and you say, oh, well, no, you can do it for $25-$35 a month rather than just paying outright. And it's not like you're paying interest on these things either. Like, that's the interesting thing. You're not paying $25 over 5 years and you end up paying $150 more for the console than you would have. In fact, I think I saw Destin Legary did some math, and you end up paying a little bit less over time for what you get in the all access than you would if you just bought all of the pieces and parts of it individually, between Game Pass Ultimate and the console itself. So, but do you think that this is going to impact the console's availability here at the start? Are they going to limit the number of people who can purchase through the all access program, or are they gonna, if they could get 100% of their sales through All Access, do you think they would be totally okay with that?
I hadn't even considered the console availability, because you're right. Every launch, that is an issue, and it's an issue people capitalize on. And I have no idea. I think they have to have thought about it, and maybe they're coming into launch with a much larger stock than they typically do. But it's going to be an obstacle for sure to keep the things in stock, because, like you said, the price point is not going to be a limiting factor this go around.
Mm-hmm.
I have to assume they're accommodating for that.
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, they have to have projections about what they think that this is going to do, and
I'm sure the pre-orders will be an indication of that too.
Yeah. Well,
I'll be interested to see what the divide between the S and the X is in terms of pre-orders.
I'd also be interested to see what the divide between people who are just buying it outright and people who are getting it through the All Access program. But you make a really good point, Larry, that I didn't think about. Like, I think this has a positive impact on scalping, because you're not going to be able to like purchase this through All Access and then turn around and sell it. I would imagine like those things have to be tied back to you in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know what that program looks like in terms of being able to pay it off early or anything like that.
And I love the idea of killing scalping consoles. Like, I get why people do it, but it just really sucks.
Especially like the time of year
it was to get a Switch.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and especially like the time of year that they're coming around, and it's just it's extra shitty when this is at the top of many people's like Christmas lists, and you've got people who are like in a back alley with a trench coat, like with a bunch of Xbox Series X's, offering them for $1,500 a pop.
Cody's face when you said trench coat.
He's got clothes on underneath it too, Cody.
And under those clothes, more Xboxes.
I think this is, there's been a lot of talk about like, okay, who's going to blink first? Like, who, as far as like the pricing of these things go, I really honestly don't think because of this, Xbox gives two shits about what Sony's going to price at, because they're going to win it. Like, we know that Sony, and look, I'm going to make this very clear. I'm not saying that Xbox is going to win the next generation, because you know what? I don't care about any of that.
I don't think they care about that.
Think they care about that either. What I'm saying is, from a price point perspective, Xbox knew going into this, we have a $300 option here that is like our nuclear option, that PlayStation is not going to have anything that's going to be able to match this that they can call next gen. Now, we can talk about whether or not Xbox Series S is technically like fully next gen with regards to like its spec power and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, like, this is a new entry into the Xbox ecosystem, and therefore is a next gen console. And I think what we tend to forget, for people who like are so into gaming that they're like listening to gaming podcasts and keeping up with gaming news, is that there is a large swath of the gaming fan base that does not give a rip about the exclusives that these consoles offer. They don't give a rip about the 150 games that you can play on this thing. There is a huge portion of the gaming audience that just wants to buy the box that they can play Fortnite, Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA with their friends. Like, I think we've talked about this on the podcast in the past. Like, I would be super interested to know the number of gamers who only play those 4 titles.
Yeah,
in some combination. What's that?
That's my brother.
Yeah.
He's been asking me like, what console should I buy? And I know what he plays. He doesn't play Fortnite anymore. He plays Warzone, 2K, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of people, at least his age, will pretty much just buy the console their friends buy so they can play with their friends. And they'll play the same 2 games on that console.
Yeah, and
with more and more crossplay, that's becoming less and less.
Exactly.
Important.
Yeah, and that's not even an issue. Yeah, that's not as much of an issue anymore.
Yeah, and so like, look, all those people want to be able to do is play on the system that's going to allow them to continue to play the games that they want to play. Like, my brother just plays Madden and 2K. Those are the only 2 games that he plays. He's probably going to get the Series S at some point when, you know, those games aren't supported on the One and PS4 anymore. And he's going to be perfectly content. And you know what those players don't give a rip about? Teraflops.
Yeah.
Those players don't give a rip about the GPU and the RAM, and that's not a diss on any of it. Like, they own their consoles for a specific purpose, and as long as they can have a box that meets that purpose, then they're totally content with it. So I think that, like, Xbox wasn't holding off on this news so that they could sidestep whatever Sony decided to do. They knew they had this $300 option in the back pocket, and when it comes to parents looking to buy next gen consoles and that kind of stuff, they have the data already from the Xbox One S and Xbox One X of what sells. So I don't know. I think it's a brilliant strategy just in understanding the market at large. And we that are like engaged in this space a lot, we get hung up on the minutia that probably 75% of this fandom doesn't care about.
Sure. And the market at large is clearly what Microsoft cares about. Like that, I forget the name of their events. What was the most recent one where they showed a bunch of games and they showed the first look of Halo?
The Inside Xboxes?
Inside Xbox. Like, that was an indication of what they're aiming for with their exclusives. It's hitting like a bunch of smaller games, but hitting a bunch of different markets. Horror games, family-friendly games, multiplayer games, the large kind of triple or quad A, triple A exclusive like Halo. Like, they are they're just playing a completely different game than Sony. And so I'm tired of the conversation around, I was tired even before this generation of the conversation around the console wars, because at this point, it's not a war. They're just in two completely different countries doing their own thing.
And doing it well.
And doing it well. Both of their goals are completely different. And that's great, actually. It's great for the market. And it's great for gamers. So I think that, like, I'm just tired of the vitriol when it comes to the console wars. And I think you're right to say that, like, they clearly had this option. It's a great option for people who, like you said, are just going to play the same game with their friends. That's all they want. Or for parents who want an entry point for their kids, aren't too concerned about, like, how many games they can play, because those kids are just going to play the same games. And they can get Game Pass if they buy into the financing option, which is great for kids as well, because kids will have a plethora of games to be able to play.
And I'm sure this is going to come packed in with a 30 days, something.
Oh, sure.
Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah, I mean, their strategy is so clear cut at this point, and the S is a truly, truly brilliant move, alongside everything else we've talked about already.
The one aspect of their strategy that I think is problematic in some ways, and we've talked about it before.
Curious here. I think we may be thinking the same thing.
Is there's not really much that I can get on the Xbox that I don't also get on a PC. And for me at least, especially the Game Pass. And for me, at least, that's what actually, we talked last episode. I plan to make the jump to PC. Like, that was one of the biggest driving forces when I found out that pretty much I can get all these games on PC. There is no exclusive thing tying me to the Xbox.
You can get the service itself on PC.
Yeah.
You can get Game Pass on PC. It doesn't have as many games as the console version of it, but it's still got a ton. Yeah, that wasn't what I was going to say.
Okay. Well, I'm curious now what yours is.
I do have one thing, and I don't even know if I agree with what I'm about to say. But one thing, like, I have to imagine there was some internal conversation about was, why make this an all-digital version of the game? Especially if a lot of the audience that's probably going to purchase this are the people that play those annualized titles, like I was just saying. FIFA players like to buy FIFA physically, because when you're done with it, you can trade it in, and you don't need like 7 different FIFAs on the shelf because they're all the same game. Same thing with Madden and 2K. Like, I wonder how big of a hang up it's going to be for some people that it's like this all digital console for guys like my brother who, you know, you can get Madden used at a GameStop for, you know, $38 after the first 2 weeks or something like that after the game comes out. The first sale where it's going to go below $40 on, you know, on a digital storefront is going to be, you know, months after launch. So, like, I think that may be a concern. I don't think it's a big enough concern. I think they've got enough data to know that tons of people are making that jump to digital. But yeah. I thought it was interesting that they removed that. But I also think being able to tout it as the smallest Xbox is a really big part of their strategy too.
Yeah, that's not as much of a concern for me.
Yeah.
I think people are moving that direction anyway, and this is a good nudge for people who aren't already moving in that direction.
It does appear that removing that disk drive is a significant part of being able to save money, though, too. Looking at previous console changes that have been made.
Yeah, I'd love to see how much the Xbox One S all digital edition sold.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had that. It's discontinued now, along with the Xbox One X, but which is interesting. You mentioned though, Larry, about moving to PC, so I wanted to go to a question. We're throwing in this new segment called "Let's Go to the Comments." So you know, we get comments on our YouTube videos and stuff, and we want to be able to address them, and we love the conversation, even if you guys disagree with us. And so this comment comes from the Thinker. He says, why would you go PC gaming when the Series X will be more powerful than your PC? That doesn't make sense unless you like spending more money on a less powerful PC. The Series X will be more powerful than 90% of PC rigs in the world and less complicated. So, Larry, for you, how would you respond to somebody like that when you just said you're going to go the PC route?
So for me, the jump came from three things. And I do want to make it clear to the Thinker that this is actually a huge deal for me because I've been gaming on consoles for like 28 years. So it wasn't a small thing, but for me it was driven by three things. One was not being able to, like, Xbox not really offering a different experience than I could get on PC, like I just talked about for a moment. The other thing is although it's less complicated, like when Nintendo is releasing this little Super Nintendo, this family computer to play games on, like, you really needed a less complicated computer to do that back then because it was really complicated. Sure, PC is more complicated than a console, but in my opinion, it's not so complicated these days that it's a huge barrier to entry. But then the third thing has to do with the better specs and the better price. And I've got two thoughts on that. One is, like Cody mentioned, they're obviously setting up to release a new series of these every couple of years, and they're going to have to keep it cutting edge. Sure, it may be one of the most powerful pieces of technology when it launches, but that's not going to be true next year. That's just how these things go. Now, I actually, before Cody said that, I was still in wild speculation territory of thinking that although they aren't going to go modular, it was going to be like last generation when they weren't going to push everyone to be online all the time. And here we are. That's just where things went. I was still thinking modular might be an option, but whether it's modular or a new console every couple of years, I'm going to have to keep buying a new console to stay cutting edge. Whereas with the PC, I could just replace a specific part every now and then and still stay in pretty good shape for a long time. And cost-wise, for me, it's not straight up PC cost versus Xbox cost. It's I have to have a computer to do a lot of other things that I do. So it's PC cost in addition to the cost of the Xbox, and that's not actually cheaper for me with the things that I need to be able to do.
That's a really good point, especially like, you know, I like to stream and I do some graphic design stuff and some video editing and all that. And like those things require a machine as well. And so in order for me to get a machine that would do those things anyway, I'm going to, you know, be at like $1,000. And so now look, I'm a sucker. I'm going to get the Xbox Series X. I'm probably going to pre-order it on the 22nd. I just love having the newest technology. And I do think it comes down to, it's a matter of preference, like all things. And in playing on PC, it's there's a world of games that you can only play on PC as well, that is a reason to want to own a PC. Like, I'm a huge League of Legends nerd, and you can't play League on anything else until Wild Rift comes out on consoles.
And they just really need more time to figure out how to make a completely terrible UI that you can't navigate on console.
Exactly.
And then we'll have League on console.
Exactly. That's the number one concern. So, but look, I think it's a good question. Like, if really you're not concerned about having a PC to do other things, and you really just want something that you can plug and play and game on, like that's why consoles exist, and that's why I've loved playing on consoles for 30 years, essentially. What are your thoughts on that, Cody?
I mean, I'm not a PC gamer. I've never been a PC gamer. I think I think I largely agree with Larry's point that, like, if you have a PC and you play games mostly on PC, you're probably not going to be eyeing a console in general. But if you are eyeing a console, I don't think the Series X or the Series S is the one for you, primarily because you're going to be able to play most of, if not all of, the titles you want to play on PC. Microsoft has guaranteed that those ecosystems are kind of pretty closely connected at this point. What I will say is that if you're a console gamer, I've heard the argument that, like, if you want the most, like, they're billing it as the most powerful console. I understand that. I also think that if you're, like, super obsessed with graphical fidelity and, like, the highest performing machine, you're not going to be buying a console, period. You're going to be buying a PC. In that case, it will run quite a bit higher than $500 if you're really going to max everything out. But as you said, Larry, you can swap out individual parts. You won't have to upgrade every few years.
Now, one of those main parts will run you multiple Xbox Series X's, but yeah.
But as someone who's not in a place to be buying a PC, I literally don't have a place for it in my apartment right now. I was going to be buying both anyway, but the Xbox is largely appealing to me because of its services. As someone who doesn't have a PC, it's just a deal that I think it's a deal that can't be beat. Game Pass is, I would argue, literally the best deal in gaming right now.
Which one are you going to go with, Cody?
The X. The 512 gigabyte hard drive is the killer for me.
Oh yeah,
that's like 2 Call of Duty updates.
That's only a little bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah. I mean, I have an external hard drive that I'll end up using for it regardless, to add even more. But the X is the one for me.
I do want to go ahead, Larry. Just a couple things I want to tack on to Cody's stuff there. One, Cody's right. This doesn't matter for me so much because all I play is Apex. But if you're someone that plays multiple games, that Game Pass deal is just insanely good.
I've been using it so much.
Yeah. Like, I've dabbled in it. I don't play enough to warrant the investment. And that's because I literally play Apex 99% of the time. If I played 98% of the time, it'd be totally worth it. But the other thing I wanted to say was, if I was going with a console, this generation would be the time that I jumped to PlayStation, because right now I still trust PlayStation to give me experiences that I can't get elsewhere. They have the better track record on that right now.
That's what they're selling themselves on.
And understand that I've never owned a PlayStation, not one time. So that's a big deal for me.
Big Boy Roy in the chat. Hello. Welcome. We're talking about the Xbox Series S and X. So if you got thoughts, feel free to throw those in the chat, as well as everybody else who is watching with us as well. Did want to mention one other thing here that I do find interesting. Larry, you sent us a spec sheet of the 2 consoles side by side. I don't really care about that, but thanks for sending it anyway.
I'm over here trying to find it and pull it up real quick so we can talk about it.
I did send a link in Discord, in our Discord chat, to the specs of the Xbox One X, though. And I think it's interesting to look at now. Look, caveating all of this with, I am not a tech person. I don't understand all the flops and GPUs and, you know, all the little minions that live inside of an Xbox that make it work.
I don't know who Terra is.
But I did pull up the Xbox One X specs and looked at them next to the Xbox Series S. And it seems like in a lot of ways, again, not knowing exactly what I'm talking about, the Xbox One X is almost a more powerful console than the Series S is. You know, the Series S is designed for 1440p gaming, while the Xbox One X, now we're getting into like crazy confusing territory, has 4K gaming. The One X has more RAM than the Series S does. And so I think one of the things that they did while we were on hiatus was they discontinued the Xbox One X production, which I'm sure we would have talked about. But I think it's twofold. I think the first is like, you just don't want a bunch of multiple SKUs of consoles for yourself, like just muddying up the market. But I think the other thing is that like this Series S is supposed to be this next gen experience, but if you look at the specs side by side, they don't look that much more impressive than the Xbox One X, and some of the specs, at least from what I can tell, don't look more impressive at all. So you definitely don't want to have like an old piece of tech that seems more powerful up against the new thing that you're trying to get people to buy. And it just, look, I understand what the Series S is supposed to do. I understand its like place in Xbox's strategy, but no, it makes that decision make a lot more sense to me, because the second reason is you just don't want those optics. Big Boy Roy in the chat says, I haven't given a damn about consoles in almost a decade, but hey, I may be buying a Series S. The monthly subscription service is too good to be true. And it really is.
Roy, just proven the last 20 minutes of conversation. Thank you, Roy.
Yeah. And Roy is a guy who plays a lot of different games too. So, you know,
yeah,
for him, that's a deal. That's a good investment. A good, what's the word I'm looking for? Where something is worth the money? Oh, your mic is muted, Larry. But he just said something really funny because he laughed at himself.
I thought investment worked.
Yeah, no, value. It's a good value. That's the word I was looking for. So I have this down in the slant, but we can throw it in here because I think it does impact kind of the conversation that we're having with regards to Xbox launch plans. But today that they announced that in the at holiday, Xbox Game Pass is going to include the EA Play subscription, which is normally $30 a year. Yeah. Includes their big vault of EA games that, you know, you've got like Battlefield in there, old Maddens and FIFAs, you've got Need for Speed, you've got Rocket Arena, things like that. No additional charge, just being thrown into Xbox Game Pass. Now, I want us to rewind a little, and I meant to pull this clip to, I think it was E3 predictions last year. I predicted that EA Play would come under the Game Pass umbrella. And here we are. It's come to fruition.
You get an extra point.
So I win the 2019 E3 predictions. But look, this, to me, this just shows like Xbox continuing to find deals that just increase the value of their services. And the more they can partner with these big brands, I mean, look, like we said, there's a lot of guys, they just play FIFA, they just play Madden, they just play those kinds of games. Like with EA Play, you get those games in the vault. There's a lot of guys who don't care to play the latest Madden. They're going to play last year's Madden, and that's in the vault to play with these. So just really cool to see their strategy continuing to pan out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cycling through everybody's video while we just watch them sit in silence. Big Boy Roy says, already pay for Game Pass and the price is going up $10 next month. An extra $10 a month to have a console. Why not? I mean, just for fun.
Yeah, that's fair.
There you go.